It's my huge pleasure to welcome and introduce Philadelphia chapter member Rabbi Richard Address, who's the founder and director of Jewish Spiritual Aging to everyone. I've known Richard for a number of years, and he's going to lead us in a conversation exploring some of the challenges faced by caregivers on a spiritual level, including such things as juggling time and family issues and hopes and dreams, and how that intersects with Jewish texts that inform this stage of life. But first, a little background about Rabbi Address. Who I just want to say I admire a great deal for his humanity, his compassion, and his easygoing erudition. He's a peripatetic spiritual leader. He travels constantly, it seems, from North Carolina to Northern California, giving counsel to Jewish spiritual leaders and congregations. He created the Jewish Spiritual Aging Project to create awareness and resources for congregations on the implications of the emerging longevity revolution and the baby boom generation. And that aging revolution and the issue of the longevity has begun to affect Jewish communal and congregational life, as well as other denominations. Obviously, everyone is affected by this. Rabbi Address serves as co-chairman for the Interfaith Working Group on Spirituality and Diversity for the Coalition to Transform Advanced Care. He's the co-chair of the Jewish Advisory Group to Samaritan Health and Hospice in Southern New Jersey, and the Jewish Advisory Group for the Alzheimer's Association of Delaware Valley. Just I'll quickly say that he was ordained at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute for Religion in Cincinnati, has served for several congregations in California before joining the Union of Reform Judaism and the Pennsylvania Council in the late 70s. He's got a honorary doctorate from Hebrew Union College, and he recently joined the institute, the Gamliel Institute, as dean, I take it? Is that correct? Yeah, I got that right, good. And which is the educational arm of a group, Kavod Nichum, which is a nonprofit organization that involves training those Jews who visit sick, caring, dying individuals, as well as giving comfort to the bereaved. Lastly, Richard is an enormous Philadelphia Phillies fan, and at last we checked, they were still up 1-0.
No, I told you Home Run Hector gave up a home run. They're now losing in the 9th inning.
So. No. Oh, man, you called it. It's unbelievable.
No, because he has no business pitching in the major leagues.
Oh, my God.
He should be taken out on the island and left it in. I predicted it.
You told me. But when we got on the call before everyone else, they were up 1-0, and it was in the 8th inning, and Richard said, it doesn't matter. They're going to bring in Home Run Hector, and he's going to give up a run. And he was right.
He gave up a home run.
That's prophecy for you.
Well, I should take a sports book. Anyway, that's probably not why these people are here. Although I would more than happy to discuss the national the fact that we have no pitching.
Well, so that you don't feel alone, gentlemen, when I lived in Malibu 30 years ago, we had a relief pitcher named Tom Niedenfuhr.
I remember him.
Invariably, Lasorda would put him in, he'd give up a home run, and the Dodgers would lose in the end of the game.
I remember Tom Niedenfuhr.
Well, okay.
Well, I'm old. I mean, me and Tyrannosaurus Rex used to hang out at the Wawa. So
okay.
Anyway, I'm sorry, Bruce. Go ahead.
No, take it away from here. I'm delighted to have a little levity before you plunge forward.
Anyway, shalom. It's nice to see all of you. Just one tiny little emendation. The program that I run is called Jewish Sacred Aging, not spiritual
Oh,
aging.
did I say that? I'm sorry. I apologize.
Never apologize for being spiritual. Jewish Sacred Aging is my baby. It grew out of the work that I did for the Reform movement, but basically it's now become a full-time job, working with synagogues and congregations and communities, and really doing a lot more private consultation with individual rabbis and families. The website, in case you want to check it out, is jewishsacredaging.com. And we also do a weekly podcast. In fact, Bruce was on one a couple of weeks ago, called Seekers of Meaning, and you can access that through the website. And I want to thank you for this opportunity, because the number one workshop that we get asked to do around the country, around North America, really, is around caregiving. I can't see the three people on the phone, but just for the informal Rabbi Address poll, just raise your hand. How many of you have been or have been involved with caring for another human being? All right, so everybody, I can't see the phone people, but you're now in the minority if you haven't. But everybody that I can see raise their hand, because everybody has done it. And as I tell people, if you haven't, the odds are you will get to turn it back sooner or later. So what I want to go over with you in as brief amount of time as possible, not the whole workshop, so don't worry, don't worry about it, and nor will there be a sermon, I hope. So listen, when I do these things, I'm not in control of the horizontal or the vertical to channel an old good TV show. If you have a question, raise your hand, and hopefully Bruce can unmute you, because the last thing you need is for me to talk for God knows how long. You'll all go to sleep. Love you. I hope you're okay. The caregiving issue is basically a new life stage. We teach it that way. It's possible for you to be a caregiver, not for weeks or months, but for years. And in fact, on one of the podcasts that we recorded this morning with a group of people who just wrote this brand new book that I'll show you on dementia-friendly worship, one of the individuals was a caregiver for over a decade. And for those of you who've walked the walk with dementia or Alzheimer's, you know that that's not unusual. A lot of the stuff that we do in Jewish Sacred Aging, regardless of whether it's caregiving or the mental health or the health and wellness or whatever, begins and ends with text. So I want to read you a prayer, because it's a great way to start this conversation. And I hope it is a conversation. This is a caregiver's prayer. It was published in a book called Alzheimer's Families by a former doctoral student of mine. I teach in the Doctor of Ministry program as well at HUC, because I got my DM through there in the Postgraduate Center for Mental Health. But Michelle wrote this book really as a result of her own parents. But this prayer really encapsulates a lot of the journey that caregivers go through on a very profound personal as well as spiritual level. The prayer goes like this: Sustainer of the universe, help me care for my loved one with hope, courage, and sensitivity. Grant me insight, resourcefulness, and the ability to ask for help and to accept help when it is needed. May I find the patience to overcome difficult moments and to find meaning and purpose in the smallest task. O eternal God, help me to remember to take care of myself so that I may have the strength to help others. Be with me and my loved one as we journey on this path together. May the one who makes peace in the heavens bring peace to me, to my family and loved ones, and to us all. Amen. In that liturgy, you have encapsulated what those of us who have walked this walk go through. The ability to ask for help, the necessity of taking care, self-care. Every time somebody who talks to me and says, I'm about to enter this arena, what advice do you have? the number one thing I tell them, as probably many of you have tell other people who talk to you, is you need to take care of yourself. You need to have proper rest. You need to have proper nutrition, because you're no good to anybody if you yourself get sick. How much the more so your loved one. The idea of asking for patience in difficult moments, when your patience and your reserves, especially if you're juggling a family, a spouse, your own children, a job, grandchildren perhaps, when you be yourself be put upon, and you just want to say, wait a minute, where I'm losing me. Me is being lost. I'm taking care of and responsible for so many other things. I'm losing my own self. This is all part of the spiritual aspect of this. There's an economic aspect of this, and Art's on the call, and from what I understand, spoke at length about this last meeting. And the economics of caregiving is really now finally slowly beginning to get some play on a local and national level. There's some states that are passing laws. We just posted another thing on the Jewish Sacred Aging Facebook page this past week by an op-ed piece that came in the New York Times by Ajen Poo about some of the economic disparities, the inequality. I was at a meeting yesterday with a new statewide organization that deals with caregiving. They're being overwhelmed by the economic inequities about people having access and affording competent care, and the economic implications of what it means to care for another human being. The Alzheimer's Association, you may know, has calculated, because it's the United States of America and everything is reduced to money, calculated that that caring for an Alzheimer's person may cost over $300 billion with a B dollars in the United States of America, if you add up all the ancillary costs, time missed, et cetera, et cetera. The cost of affording to place someone in an assisted living facility. There was a survey in the Philadelphia Inquirer 2 years ago, which means it's already way, way, way out of date, that said for a basic assisted living apartment was approximately $3,000 a month. I knew from my own mom it was way more than that. To the cost of bringing somebody in to take care of somebody on a home health care worker, where a lot of times insurance doesn't cover that. A lot of companies have minimum numbers of hours. You write a lot of checks for those of us who've had to do that. And then there's the whole morality issue of having to spend down a person's assets in order for them to qualify for Medicaid, which some people, like we had to do with my mom and other people that I've talked to as I go around. So the stress and strains of caregiving, the multi-generational ideas of caregiving are phenomenal. And as I said, this really is a new life stage. In the Jewish community, as Bruce alluded to, obviously I do all my work in the Jewish community. 25% of the current 5 3/4 affiliated Jews in the United States of America are over 65. So, and the baby boom generation now, which stretches from basically around 74 to 54, are now entering this key area. And so it's not unusual, as many of you probably know, for somebody who is, let's say, 70 years of age, to still be taking care of a parent who's in their 90s, very involved perhaps with an adult child who may be in their late 30s or early 40s, who may still be working, and still, if they live in the same town as grandchildren, be very involved with, in some ways, taking care of or driving carpool with their own grandchildren. At the same time, when they themselves, let's say at 68, 70, 72, their own physical issues may be beginning to change. So this is a brand new phenomenon that we're talking about. And the implications are worldwide. I was just in London, and I'm riding on the plane home an article in The Guardian, an interview with Ashton Applewhite on her new book, talked about some of the British statistics, which are equally as frightening, even though they have national health. But the drain on national health on care homes is phenomenal over there. As you know, the National Association of Caregivers, AARP, has actually figured out what the typical caregiver is in the United States of America. It's a woman about 50 years of age who's caring for a widowed mother who does not live with her. She's married and employed. Most caregivers still are women. About a quarter, according to these latest statistics, about a quarter of all caregivers are millennials, people between the ages of 18 and 34, which surprises the heck out of people. And one of the largest growth factors of people who are caregivers are now men, because of the change in the family dynamics in the United States of America. 40%, according to the AARP, our caregivers are now men, up from 34% in 2010. And so this also changes the family dynamic, because this caregiving is a multi-generational issue. It's a family dynamics issue. It's a multi-generational issue. One of the other things that's absolutely frightening, and the implications for the future, and this I first ran into in a book called The Coming Generational Storm by Professor Kotlikoff, who's at BU, that the number of full-time workers who are paying into Social Security Medicare has shrunk precipitously in the last several decades, that it's now down to about 2.5 to 3 full-time workers, as from a high of about 7 to 1 post-World War II, paying into these programs. So if you see the articles that are almost regularly coming about the implications of, you have this huge baby boomer pool who are now turning 60. Remember, somebody turns 65 in the United States every 8 seconds. And according to the government, and you know the government does not lie, according to the government, about 10,000 people turn 65 every day in the United States of America. So this huge chunk is now accessing Social Security, Medicare. And so if you don't have enough people on the bottom end in full-time work paying into these systems, the implications over the next 10, 15, 20 years as baby boomers age out is very, very challenging. Let's say challenging. And of course, very few people are actually substantively talking about it. But we're not here to discuss politics. One of the other things that's really impacting us, and is going to impact every single congregation, is this explosion in dementia and Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Association now says there's about 5 million people in the United States of America who are dealing with Alzheimer's. And as the baby boomers age out over the next 20 years, that number is supposed to grow to about 15 million. And there just aren't enough. We've done interviews and podcasts with docs and nurses. There just aren't enough qualified geriatricians, trained healthcare workers to take care of us, which is going to put some more burden on families and religious organizations, many of whom are now slowly starting to step up to the plate and try to figure out ways of dealing with people and supporting people in their own congregation. But again, this is an issue that really, it's a social question, it's an economic question, it's a political question, but for our purposes, it's also a spiritual question. Because caregiving also raises the spiritual question, as many of us have asked, is this me? Is this me in a couple of years? And who's going to take care of me? The Gen Xers, we've done a very poor job as a society of training people and talking about how to take care of somebody. In most families, there's usually a designated caregiver. And one of the challenges of mobility is that designated caregiver may be 1,000 miles away. And proximity to the person needing care has no relationship to the designated caregiver, because that designated caregiver often was assigned that role in childhood or grew up that way. And we know if you ask any clergy person or elder care lawyer who deals with this in a lot of ways, have you been involved in an experience where, let's say, dad is in need of care, he's undergoing radical change, one sibling lives 2 miles away from dad, but the designated caregiver who had that role in growing up lives 4 hours away. And that's the burden, that's the challenge, and it creates a tremendous amount of stress and strain upon a family system, as well as the individual needing care. And this is not unusual. And how much the more so, if you're an only child, like I was, you really don't have any, there's no backup. I remember walking out of the nursing home when my mom was in her final stages and calling up a friend of mine and saying, you know, I really wish I had a brother and sister that I could just dump some of this time off. And which they laughed, they burst out laughing and said, you don't know how lucky you are that you don't have to negotiate brothers or sisters and time and relationships and past hurts and past issues. Be that as it may. The caregiving thing spiritually involves a significant amount of, I think, personal challenges. Excuse me. There's tremendous opportunities, I would also suggest to you, in the spiritual realm for spiritual growth. There is a moment sometimes, if you're lucky, and I use that term advisedly, if you're lucky enough to be able to do this mitzvah of caring for another human being, where a lot of times there's a role reversal. I mean, some of you may have encountered this, where you take mom or dad to the doctor and you realize that as you help them out of the car to take them into the office and you put your arm around them and you feel perhaps for the first time the frailty, you feel the bones, you feel the frailty of their body. And you realize that in those moments that you're now living, there's a not so subtle shift in role reversal. That this parent who may have been idealized and larger than life is now becoming in many ways dependent upon you. And that is a spiritual moment worthy of a blessing. In many ways, it is a moment where you come face to face with the cycle of life, but also your responsibility and channeling what in our tradition is the fifth commandment of honoring and respecting a parent, which is repeated 3 times in the Torah, but carries with it, but is carried out through other religious traditions. Within our tradition, that commentary of honor and respect is magnified intensely in the Talmud, that book of legal conversation from the 5th and 6th century, where they actually unpack what it means to honor and what it means to respect. I'll spare you the Talmudic discussion. It's a very timely conversation in many ways, because in the context of the conversation, they talk about really what it means to you're reminded constantly that of a person's dignity, and that you may never, in our tradition, you may never do anything to take away a person's sense of dignity. So even if mom or dad is having an argument and really is wrong, the tradition is you don't interrupt them. You don't take away that sense of their personhood in public. You can sit down quietly on the drive home and say, let me talk about what you said. I think maybe there's another way of approaching it. But you don't stop a conversation and say, oh, mom, I think you're really, really off base there, because you don't publicly embarrass somebody. The conversation also asks how people pay in the Talmud. How about people pay for caregiving? And believe it or not, it's not about money. It's about time, which is very relevant to the challenges of contemporary society when you may be asked to take dad to a doctor and then out to lunch and go to the CVS and get the prescription filled, and you wind up missing perhaps 3/4 or a whole day of work. And you haven't paid with any money, but you've paid with time. And the Talmudic conversation in the tradition and the commentaries also talks about money, the fact that you can use money as a controlling mechanism in a caregiving context, which is phenomenal that you're talking about a text that's 1,500 years old, but yet understood that you can use money to control another human being, and by controlling them, take away their sense of dignity and purpose. And likewise, the tradition also, and this is a phenomenal thing to teach in a session because it usually gets raised eyebrows, you're commanded in our tradition to honor, and you're commanded to respect. What are you not commanded to do? You're not commanded to love. And there's a rather interesting series of interpretations in some books that really talk about that dichotomy. You are not commanded to love, and indeed there is some conversation from the tradition as up to the current interpretations from contemporary scholars that say if a parent, especially a parent, has abrogated their Jewish moral values in raising you, have abandoned you, or were abusive, molested, just done everything to take away their sense of their own affiliation with Jewish values and text, and therefore infantilized or harmed you, that parent has abrogated their right to being cared for, to be honored, and to be respected. If you choose to do it, but that's a very interesting conversation to have with people, because invariably, if you teach this in a workshop, somebody's going to raise their hand and say, you mean to tell me that no good SOB who walked out on my family, who walked out on my mother or my father and myself, and we had to fend for ourselves, you mean to tell me now 50 years later I'm responsible to take care of them? And the answer to some of the, not all, but some of the interpretations in the tradition is no, you're not, because they abrogated their responsibility. And one of the other issues that comes up all the time in conversation with Carrie, I'm sure some of you have had this conversation, is when is it appropriate to say to our parent, for example, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it anymore. I can't take care of you. It's becoming too much. We have to find a facility. Even though 2 years ago we were having a cup of coffee at the deli and you looked at me straight in the eye and you said, no matter what you do, don't you ever put me in one of those places. And believe it or not, there's a text from Maimonides, one of our great scholars in the 12th century, who unpacks that and says, look, there may come a time when on two levels you should do this. You're permitted to do this. One, if it becomes too burdensome for you, or two, for the health and safety of your loved one. If you can't properly provide that type of a health and safety environment in your home, let's say, then it may be a higher value to place a person in a facility so that they can be best taken care of. To be very honest with you, I just visited a friend of mine in, what's today? Thursday, yesterday, or Tuesday, who is exactly in that situation. He's dealing with very serious illness, and his daughter, who's 40 years old, single mom, basically said, there's a danger of you falling. I'm working during the day. If you fall in the middle of the day, I won't know about it. You've already fallen 3 or 4 times. You now need to go on dialysis. I just can't deal with this anymore. For your own safety, you need to be in this facility. And thankfully, this guy did not fight it. He understood that it was absolutely, because has fallen many, and seriously fallen. So there are texts within the corpus of our tradition that are very focused, humane, and contemporary that you can apply to almost every single caregiving situation, including Alzheimer's and dementia. There's values. We don't have the time to go into all of them. There's significant numbers of values, and if a person puts themselves in danger, for just quickly for an example of somebody who has beginning to have onset, has a series of TIAs, these mini strokes, but says to you, "Don't worry, I'm still driving. I'm not driving long distance. I know how. I'm driving from my house to the supermarket, or the synagogue, or to my friend Rose's house. That's all I'm doing." And if you say then, but in that drive that you don't know if you're going to have another one of these episodes, and by definition, not only do you put yourself in danger, but by definition, you put everybody else on the road in danger, and you can't do that. And that's the text unpacks this as saying, okay, that's an issue where a higher value of the saving and protection of life or threat to oneself changes the dynamic. Changes the dynamic. So the conversation in our tradition around this whole universe of caregiving is so powerful. It's all text-based, but really speaks to what people are going through. And in the end here, it's also very spiritual because it talks about where am I? When I see my parent, when I see my spouse, when I've just gone with my spouse and received that diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia, and I'm taking care and the stresses, but in the back of my mind and in the heart of my soul is the question of, is this me? And what happens if it is me? And what does it mean? And there's a huge amount of material being written. Let me show you this. I just did a podcast with these people today. It'll air sometime in July. This is a book called Dementia Friendly Worship by Linda Everman and Don Wendorf. They're from Birmingham, Alabama. They've both walked this walk with their spouses. And this is nothing more than a handbook of services, prayers, meditations, reflections, multi-denominationally, from Native American Indians to Muslims to Hindus to Jews to Protestants to Catholics, who talk about the impact of dementia in various forms on a spiritual level. Prayers, how to create a service, how to create a dementia-friendly congregation, all motivated by this spiritual desire, this spiritual demand out of caregiving. This is becoming more and more part of the conversation. More and increasingly, the state of Washington is a leader in this, to start talking about legislation that provides family care, tax credits for family caregivers. There's not enough people who are doing this. There's an organization out of Washington called Washington, D.C. called STRIA, S-T-R-I-A. They just published another article, another study about the number of people who are going to be needing long-term care, issues of the activities of daily living, the cost about this, the need for legislation to be passed on state level and even the federal level. One of the organizations I work with, CTAC, the Coalition to Transform Advanced Care, is trying to advocate federal legislation on this area. There's stuff in the pipeline, but Washington is a little fluid right now. So all these wind up being embracing this larger terminology, this larger concept of caregiving. And for us in the religious world, these are profoundly spiritual questions. They go back to, who am I? What does it mean to take care of another human being? And we're not just talking about older adults and elder parents. We're talking about spouses. We're talking about children. In the disabilities world, one of the issues that comes up in conversation a lot from baby boomers is, I have an adult child who is dealing with severe disabilities. I take care of them. When I die, who is going to take care of them? Where do they go? How are they going to be cared for? These are way beyond political, social questions, but they're spiritual questions because they go to the heart of what it means to be a human being, what it means to have meaning in life, what it means to have purpose, what it means to find out who, in the essence of who we are as a human being. And, you know, to channel Heschel in some of his books, God in Search of Man and Man in Search of God, human beings, we are creatures in search of meaning because meaning is in search of us. And one of the ways I think all of us who've done this work and have had this opportunity in our lives that we can find a sense of meaning is in this, doing this, as we say, this mitzvah of caregiving. It is profound. There's no way, there's no paradigm. As we tell people, you can go to Barnes and Noble or go to the great God Amazon and get every single book on caregiving. And it doesn't mean anything because every single one of us are individual. Every single one of our situations is unique. Every single one of the situations in caring for another human being really embraces the family of origin context that all of this comes from. And in doing so, you really have to craft an individual plan. That's why, by the way, the Raj stuff on the care map and the care plan, the people developing care plans, is so valuable. And that issue also is becoming more important in congregational life, in educational people, and educating people, that in addition to the medical directive plan, you know, what are my wishes at the end of life? More and more are we now suggesting to people that they also develop a care plan. In case of serious illness, who's going to take care of me? How are we going to do this? How are we going to divide up the responsibilities, the finances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? It's equally as important, given longevity, given the fact that we're living longer and the demands are more crucial than anything else. It's 4:45. I know Bruce said this ends around 5, so I'll stop. Questions, feel free to ask anything your heart desires, hopefully about sports.
So I'll unmute, or you can unmute yourselves, and anyone who wants to can either jump out with a question or raise their hand, and I'll be sure to unmute you. Yosef, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Richard. Good to see you. And this was really quite a presentation you did. When you said, "Is this me?" You said, "Is this me?" What's going on with that question? Who's asking that?
I'll give you a personal example.
Yeah.
There came a time, my mom crashed with dementia. She died as a result of that. And her precipitous downfall took about 1.5 years. And the last 6 months when she really, really crashed, I call it crash. She was in a skilled nursing home that was horrible. And I would sit there and visit her, and she rarely at the end even recognized me. Curiously enough, I would mention her great-granddaughter, Ayla, and her face would change. And when I brought the little girl at the time, she was 1.5 years, 2 years old, there was a physical change. But I would sit there and I will tell you point blank, is this going to be me in 20 years?
Oh, okay.
And it's frightened the crap out of me. All right. It's very, very frightening. And so the more people have an opportunity to talk about that frightening, it has to be unpacked. I mean, there are ways of, I just did a meeting with Samaritan Hospice for our annual program that we're planning for next year. We're going to probably just focus on this. That's what I meant, Yosef. Is this me? Because I think everybody, if they're honest with themselves in a situation like this, We don't know. We don't know whether it's cancer, whether it's ALS, whether when you're dealing with this type of very, very serious type of something that can last a long time. There's a moment, I think, when we really self-identify. Is this, and there's all kinds of psycho-spiritual stuff here and therapeutic stuff. If we had, lots of time to unpack this, or the psychologist or the psychiatrist could obviously unpack aspects of that. But that's what I mean. And I think it's a very profound, because it's very frightening. Look, these intimations of our own mortality that every single one of us on this call are dealing with are very frightening. And we don't live in a society which encourages these conversations on a substantive level. And that's a shame. I mean, and the more this is why death cafes are becoming popular and memory cafes are becoming popular, because slowly but surely baby boomers, we realize in our gut that we have a limited amount of time. And time, and this is driving me crazy in the way is the one thing that we can't control. You can control your diet. I could sit in a synagogue 24 hours a day. I could pray every prayer that is known to the human race. I could never look at a cheeseburger or eat a gluten. Okay? Doesn't mean anything, because I can't control time. And every single one of us knows somebody who thought they had more time. And that's the profound, the spiritual question in Jewish sacred aging that we always talk about when I go out is, given the fact that you cannot control the wild card of time, what are you going to do with the time that you have left, knowing that you can't control it? That is the spiritual question.
That's a big question.
Yeah, well, listen, there's a hand in the lower left-hand corner.
I didn't see it. There we go. Carmel.
Hi.
Let me unmute you.
Unmute her.
Yep, there you go. There you go, Carmel.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Address. Could you just tell us the name of that book again about spirituality, caregiving, and spirituality? You held it up and I didn't write it down.
Okay, it's called this book that I held up.
Yes, Dementia-Friendly Worship. Okay.
It's called Dementia-Friendly Worship. The editors are Everman, Everman, and Wendorf, Wendorf. It's published by, just came out. It's published by Kingsley Publications.
Okay.
And they just recorded the podcast for my Seekers of Meaning, and the podcast will post in the end of July.
Oh, okay.
It'll be on the website and then archived on the website, jewishsacredaging.com.
Okay, thank you.
Art?
Rebbe, thanks. You're a gas.
Yeah. Well,
Out with you privately sometime. Several things I made note of during your soliloquy of very cool stuff. I'm a devotee of public radio, including This American Life. Several years ago, they had a piece where I forget whether it was the gentleman or his wife whose mother had Alzheimer's, and they both had a background in improv, live theater. And instead of arguing with or challenging mom, the mother-in-law, about, no, it's not that, it's this, they would instead adopt certain precepts of improv and just draw their mom out, saying things like, and what else? And what else? And what else? Instead of no, or putting up a wall or arguing.
right.
And it got all of them into a better headspace and an easier time. And that has been adopted interestingly, so I understand, as a way to make things easier for
Absolutely.
the individual and the caregiver.
In fact, the two people that we were talking about that today, so I asked a question about the use of senses and the varieties of, touch, taste, smell. And they were talking about the use of theater and art and music. And, there's so much misconception about how to deal and care for somebody with dementia and Alzheimer's because there's so many different types. But what you're saying is really on the cusp of a lot of creativity right now. There's a lot of research going on how to deal with this issue, and a variety of different ways of how to live. We're talking about this, not die with Alzheimer's, how to live with it. And it changes the focus in a healthy way, in a healthy way.
Several other things.
Art, there was at the Positive Aging Conference in Washington 2.5, 3 years ago, there was a woman from Philadelphia, I can't remember her name, who did improv for us, taught improv specifically for that purpose. And it was very both rewarding and revealing about, and I don't know whether Yosef or Richard know that person from Philly who does those improv.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but I'll check it.
Yeah, that actually would be really great to know.
I'll look back on the program because it was really beneficial. And
I was at that conference, and
you were. I remember you.
I don't know whether I have that. Still have.
And it was actually happened in the room when they did that. We had simultaneous sessions going on, and you were doing a session, and
and everybody was yelling at each other. Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
Nobody could hear it.
Exactly right.
A few other things I made note of. I can't remember which NPR broadcast it was. It might have been The World or something. They talked about two countries that have been very good in developing campuses for people who have cognitive diminishment.
Yeah, in Scandinavia.
Holland and one other.
I think it was Sweden.
They're safe within these environments. They can go do whatever they want. They're not going to get hurt, and wandering is a non-issue. What else? One of the things that I made available to Joyce and Bruce a couple months ago, which I had on my screen last month, was a template I developed and honed over the years called My Desires. And it starts out with who's your go-to person, who do you want being responsible for your care, and it's an ongoing family conversation. And it dovetails down to insurance, but it's operative and germane, even if one has no insurance, doesn't want it, can't afford it, whatever. Next, this figure used about $3,000 for assisted living.
It's very low. That's not real.
Well, most every entity, it's an entry fee of low four figures, and they're on what's called a point system. So the greater the degree to which one needs help, the higher the monthly cost.
Right. When I saw that in the newspaper, I put it in the study guide that we do when we do the workshop. But everybody laughs at it. I said, look, this shows you how out of touch. This is ridiculous, the fun, because then everybody says, well, from my mom or my dad, it costs way more. For my mom, when she went into assisted living, was way more than, but yes. And then, go ahead.
And then one last thing, and I still run into people who are unaware of this. About 10, 12 years ago, the federal government took the lid off of states on the Medicaid system and let them develop what was called the partnership. Now, 20 years ago, under the Waxman bill, our congressman out here, California, New York, Indiana, and Connecticut were so-called test states. And basically, now 40 states have this construct where, as a reward to buying long-term care insurance, if you run out of insurance benefits, most states have what's called a dollar-for-dollar asset disregard. So if, for example, a policy paid $188,000 in benefits and petered out, that individual could keep $188,000 in assets they'd otherwise have to go through and be eligible for Medicaid. So it's a reward and incentive for that many states give to get at least some coverage.
Art, let me ask you a question.
Information all over the web about it.
Is it true in your, because you're the professional, that a lot of the companies that were selling long-term care insurance have now dropped out of that market?
Well, that's true because they have what we call in Yiddish a pekel of surus. The two main entities that suffered that fate are GE, which became Genworth, and John Hancock, because they have what's called a lot of legacy business where they're growing people's benefits at typically 5% compound, and their investments couldn't keep up with it. So they left the market. Mutual of Omaha has been the most popular policy in the country for about 5 years. We do a lot of it because they were fortunate enough not to be in the market and have a pekel of surus before the Great Recession hit. And they have policy constructs where you can buy low inflation riders that comport with state law, anywhere from 1% to 3%, depending on the state. The bottom line is, although many carriers have left the market, there's others that are still in the market.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, Yosef, before I call on Yosef, is there anyone else who has a question they'd like to ask? And if you are on the phone and want to ask, I'm going to unmute you and you can just ask. I think I've unmuted everybody if you're on the phone and want to ask a question.
Yeah, this is Joyce. Earlier, Rabbi, you mentioned we are creatures in search of meaning, and meaning is in search of us.
That's
Is that something specifically addressed?
Say again?
You mentioned we are creatures in search of meaning, and meaning is in search of us.
Yes.
And I wonder if is that in writing? Is there something that expounds on just that concept in the rest repertoire of your library or articles or work that you do?
It's right up there, in two books by Abraham Joshua Heschel, which is who wrote it, God in Search of Man and Man in Search of God, and also in a book of essays called The Insecurity of Freedom, which is a beyond brilliant book of essays. I mean, it passed brilliant years ago. It's cosmic. He writes poetry. I mean, he writes prose, it's poetry. But this is one of his basic theological tenets, that we are in search of meaning, and meaning is in search of us.
Who's the author again?
Abraham Joshua Heschel.
Thank you.
One of the two greatest theologians of the 20th century, Jewish theologian, he and Buber. But Heschel is just brilliant.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, once you start reading him, you won't stop.
Perfect.
And I suggest, if you're going to start this book of essays called The Insecurity of Freedom, it's about 40, 50 years old, but every single essay could have been written yesterday.
Excellent. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other questions? Yosef, you had a follow-up question you want to ask?
Just a quick thing, that this is about congregational support for people who are caregivers, and that on an acute basis, congregations generally have good capacity to step in, to do meals, to do visits, to do coverage, to do rides. But for the longer term kinds of caregiving, it's most congregations are not prepared to do it. There's a model called Share the Care. Right. And in places like Wisconsin, they've actually, and in Hawaii, they've done it on a large scale. But it's like, what are you going to do for the extended kinds of things that have to happen? And but that's a real opportunity and a challenge, because congregations don't have the resources, but the congregants have the needs.
And they don't have the resources, and it's mostly volunteers, and volunteers have a high burnout rate. And technology is starting. I mean, the Caring Bridge, people in congregation land who are seriously ill, who need meals and stuff, they use the internet now, and they'll sign up. But this is all a result of the boomers aging. And you're right. And If you're in a small congregation, 80 family congregation, 100 family, it's just not enough physical manpower, person power, a lot of time to support stuff. And they may not have a full-time rabbi. And it's a real, and this challenge is only going to get greater, not less. It's going to be greater.
So to follow up on that, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is the burden on clergy everywhere, not just in the Jewish community, but across denominations. And I wonder how congregations are dealing with the fact that their clergy themselves can't handle the size of demand upon them. And is there any movement inside of any of the institutions to figure out how to deal with the caregiving crisis?
Yeah, I mean, way back in the dark ages of the early 1980s, when I was working for the URJ, the whole Synagogue as a Caring Community program was born, based upon two congregations, one in Miami and one in Kensington, Maryland. And so, and there are now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of congregations across the denominational line who have these support, and they call them by a variety of different names, because they really understand that clergy, despite how brilliant they are, or there's just not, first of all, Bruce, the time, I mean, this takes time. So there are very successful programs that are in operation that are really, really great. I go out and do training for these congregations sometimes, used to do it all the time. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge because a lot of the lay people understand that the burdens placed upon a congregational rabbi in the 21st century are significantly different than they were 50 years ago. And part of that also is a significant shift, in my opinion, in the nature of rabbinic congregation relations. There's a not so subtle shift that's been taking place in the last 15 to 20 years that is changing the dynamic and how lay people are perceiving the rabbi and vice versa. And it has significantly changed a lot of these, just the relationships. But congregations are responding. When I taught at HUC, when I was teaching in the Rabbinic and School of Education program, we spent a lot of time on how to create such a program in your congregation. There's a real need for this in seminaries. If I had a lot of money, which I don't, and had the cooperation of the seminaries, which are another story, there's a real need to have this institutionalized in coursework to train the next generation of rabbis and cantors who go out and all of a sudden within a week of their being ordained are going to be faced with this issue. So it's all transition. This part, Bruce, of this, what I call the age of transition that we're in. The whole nature of synagogue life is literally changing in front of us.
Well, thank you. I don't know if it's now 5 after 5, so if there is any last questions, Renee, hold on, let me unmute you.
I was just, and if we can't follow it up now, I was interested in the share the care model that Yosef referred to, and this may not be the best place, but I'd like to follow up and find out.
I would be glad to, if there's a way, Bruce, that can link us. But glad to share it.
Well, you're both
care about the sharing the care.
You're both on the connector, so you.
I'm embarrassed to say I'm not yet. Okay, so.
Well, shame on you, Joseph. But I will then, in that case, I will send you each other's email, and I'm going to shame you and cast shade on you until I get you on.
You got it. Okay, right. So I'll be so shamed.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank Richard for giving us his time and sharing his wisdom with us. It's, an enormous gift for all of us and greatly appreciated. And we'll post this on the site as soon as I have a chance to just put it into shape to put it up there, but it will do it shortly so that other members across the Life Planning Network can enjoy it and learn from it. And I appreciate everyone showing up today. Next month, we're going to have Rajiv Mehta, who this will be a bit of a follow-on to this. In a way, we had Art on long-term care insurance. We've had Rabbi Address addressing the spiritual component, and Raj Mehta is a former NASA scientist who then worked for Apple, who then went out to study healthcare and developed something called the Atlas of Caregiving, which is a unique, a kind of brilliant approach to forming caregiving community and understanding your caregiving circle. And so and I think I haven't had a complete discussion with Raj about this yet, but our initial conversation was about using our Life Planning Network group in effect like a care circle to experiment with the Atlas of Caregiving. So I hope you'll all join us for that, and greatly.
He did a podcast for us too. I think it airs in a couple of weeks.
He did, great. And how did that go? He's a brilliant guy.
Really, you'll enjoy listening to him next month. You'll enjoy listening to him on the podcast. He's a super guy.
Yeah. So thank you all. I wish you all a happy holiday weekend next week, this week, whenever it is. And I hope the Phillies get some relief pitching.
I just found out they won 6-3. There is a God.